So who should pay for the clean-up? There are 3 forestry owners harvesting in the area: Hikurangi, P.F. Olsen and Earnslaw 1. Peter Weir is the Environment Manager for Earnslaw 1. He's also the President of the Forest Owners Association.
I can understand they're upset. Those criticisms would sound very harsh. We've done issues like we have offered housing to people that are dislocated. We are offering our counselling service to such people. We would love to get down with our machinery out of the forest to help with the clean-up, but there is a couple of large holes in the District Council road where landslides have come down on farms. So we can't even get into our forest, and we can't get machinery out to help until the District Council road is repaired back through those farms. Separately, we've got 2 machines collectively. The forestry companies from Gisborne and from upslope of Tolaga Bay have 3 machines cleaning up the beach. Farmers don't want our heavy machinery on their paddocks because the paddocks are sodden, and we can absolutely understand that. Who wants a 40-tonne excavator and 20-tonne dump trucks running through a paddock? We would just make a huge mess. So we all collectively have to take a breath and wait till this dries out a bit.
Well, they don't want the heavy machinery, but what they do want is money, $100 million worth. Will the forestry companies come to the party to help them pay for the damage and the clean-up?
Well, this is the first I've heard of that request. Our company, Earnslaw 1, has committed to make 2 excavators available for as long as it takes to do the clean-up. But as I say, we have to wait for the sun to come out and the paddocks to dry out a bit before we can do that. We'll bring extra machines in from Gisborne if we have to, if we can't get the stuff out of our forest.
As a man who knows forestry, knows the land, do you think that that $100 million figure might be roughly right for the amount of damage caused in the area?
Look, I have no idea where that number's come from, so I really can't comment on that. First I've heard of it.
The farmers are also saying that they're considering legal action against the forestry companies. Is that something that you would be prepared to fight?
Well, under the Resource Management Act, our company just had a complete audit in our forest 8 weeks ago, a 2-day audit. There were no issues raised. So if it's breaches of the Resource Management Act, I'm not really seeing the grounds for such things. Look, I fully understand emotions are running high. We're absolutely committed to do our bit, our fair share, to help with the clean-up downstream of our forest. Not putting quantums on it, but we do have to wait for the sun to come out.
What do the forestry owners need to do to satisfy that resource consent in terms of preventing damage like this?
Our harvesting resource consent required us to put slash traps in streams. I should point out, we finished harvesting up there 3 to 4 years ago. We've replanted our crop, and in places we've lost our crop. Our crop's sort of Christmas tree sized height. But anyway, we continue to maintain and clear those debris traps for about 4 or 5 years after harvest for anything that does come through. Our slash traps, our woody debris traps, were completely overwhelmed and ripped out. This was a big event. This was bigger than Cyclone Bowler, but incredibly localised in one catchment. We have another forest only 15 kilometres away in exactly the same state, with no damage in it whatsoever because it didn't get the rain. We've had a huge burst of rain, very, very localised, which has hammered our forest. I really can't speak. I haven't seen what's happened to our neighbours' forest, but I understand there's storm damage in all 3 of them. This was Milford Sound-style rain, 2 inches an hour for a number of hours on the most erodible country in New Zealand, and it literally fell apart. This was a repeat of Cyclone Bowler, but very localised.
So if your company was doing everything that was required under council rules to prevent this happening, do you think that there needs to be a change to those rules? Because it obviously didn't work, did it? All this slash came down anyway and did a lot of damage to property and stock.
Listen, I believe this is sort of a Berlin Wall comes down moment. I think there will probably be an inquiry and there will probably be significant changes. That said, 1st of May this year, a new raft of changes came in under the Resource Management Act, which lifts the bar makes it a lot more onerous, creates new rules for harvesting, creates new rules for working around streams. Of course, this new suite of rules hasn't been tested, and it certainly didn't apply to harvesting that was done 5 years ago and replanting that occurred 4 years ago. But absolutely, things are going to change.
We spoke to Peter Clark from PF Olsen's the other day, and he was saying that he thought perhaps it's time for large tracts of forestry in that area to be retired. Are you saying the same thing?
Certainly time for silvicultural practices to be reviewed on the worst of the worst country. This National Environmental Standard has an erosion map underpinning it. It's called an erosion classification system. It's available online. Across all of New Zealand, about 7% of the land under plantation forests is red zoned. On the east coast, probably 40% of the land under plantations is red zoned, and that's because plantations were put on highly erodible country by the East Coast Forestry Scheme. Absolutely appropriate to review the silvicultural practices. It may be that on the worst of the worst country, completely different tree species might be planted on that. Just have to put in the New Zealand context, it's less than 10% of the total estate, but on the East Coast, it's probably 40% of the current estate. So a well-informed inquiry would be a very good thing to look at those issues, in my opinion.
That's the President of the Forest Owners Association, Peter Weir.